We are up to the Pei Aleph Amid Aleph. Just a quick recap. So we know that there are two categories of the Nedarim that a husband has a right to annul the Nedarim of his wife. One is if she inui nefesh, if she harms herself physically, psychologically, and those Nedarim are annulled forevermore, even if they separate, those Nedarim do not get resurrected. And then you have Nedarim, which are merely beinoi lebeina, that is having an impact on their personal relationship. So you can annul it. Both of them you can only annul till that evening, according to the halacha, and according to the Mishnah. And but those Nedarim are only annulled while they have a relationship. The moment their relationship is over, the neder comes back. We did have an argument in Rishonim: does it come back as soon as their relationship is over, or as long as there's a potential to have a relationship, which means if they're divorced, but they can always get remarried again, the neder is null and void. It's only if she marries somebody else in the interim that the neder gets resurrected, and it needs to have a separate haTorah, going to 3 rabbis and so on. Then we had a discussion, the not taking a bath or not putting on makeup, if that's considered inui nefesh, which were the Rabbanan hold, it's inui nefesh, harmful psychologically or physically. And according to Rabbi Yossi, we're not sure, does he consider that beinoi lebeina, still impacting their relationship? I will see in the Gemara, or not even that. Now, just interesting, talking about taking showers. There's a medrash in Parshas Bahar, in Medrash Rabbah, in Parsha Lamed Daled, Pasuk Gimel. So the medrash says there a very interesting thing. It says there that Hillel Hazaken, when he used to leave his students and they would escort him, they would say to him, Rebbe, where are you going? And he would say, I'm going to perform a mitzvah. And they said to him, which mitzvah are you going to perform? He said, I'm going to take a bath. And they said to him, what kind of mitzvah is that, taking a bath? It's one thing, Ezra came along and made a special takana that on Thursdays, out of Shabbos, you take a bath. But what's this thing that you say there's a mitzvah to take a bath? So the Hillel said to them, yes, there is. And he says as follows: if you have effigies of a king that they place everywhere in different squares, in different theater places or other buildings, then they appoint a special person, and the person has one sole responsibility to make sure that all of these effigies remain clean, washes them all the time, and this person gets paid handsomely for the work that they do. And not only that, he's treated as part of the royal family, or that he's part of the government. Every one of us are created in the image of Hashem. So it's our duty to take care of ourselves physically, spiritually, and therefore we should take a bath. I guess exercise, all that comes into play as well.
Where are we up to, please?
We are up to the Pei Aleph Amid Aleph, about we're up to Sholchu Mitam, 5 lines on top of the page. And then Rabbi Yossi, however, the Gemara's last thing we learned, Rabbi Yossi says that not laundering your clothes is far worse than not taking a shower. And in fact, he says if you have 2 towns and you have insufficient water, and what happens, if the town where the water originates have first rights to the water, and to anything which is par, 2 towns, other town needs the same thing, same requirement as you have. If it's only sufficient for the town that originated, then they're the ones with sole rights. But then we discussed what happens if the first town wants to use the water to launder their clothes, and the second town needs the water to drink. And the Chacham said, no question, survival comes first. Rabbi Yossi says, no, laundering the clothes comes first. It's their water, they have the right to launder the clothes because it's painful. And we already discussed what Shulchan Aruch has a whole argument, if your pain takes precedence over somebody else's life. And according to Rabbi Yossi, yes, it does. Now, so then we want to know about laundering. Rabbi Yossi says is more critical, or is critical far more than taking a shower. Why? So we said that not taking a shower causes you to have boils, but not laundering clothes causes you to go mad. And the Ran says there's no cure for people who go mad. For boils, there are many cures. So says the Gemara, 5 lines on top of the page. Sholchu Mitam, they sent from Israel to Babel. Couple of things. Hizaru, be careful about Bavulvia. Be careful with having dirt mixed in your hair, because that causes you to become blind. or if you don't take a shower, you're not hygienic, then it causes you to have boils, and if you don't launder your clothes, you will go mad. Next thing he said, hizar b'chabura. Make sure that when you study Torah, you always have a chaver, you always have a charusa, you have a friend, someone that you can talk to and debate and work things out. And the last thing is hizaru b'vnei aniyim. You should treat with respect the children of the poor. Shemehen takes it Torah, because you'll find in many instances the children of the poor, their children will become rabbis, talmidei chachamim, and scholars. Shenemar, it says, Yizal mayim medolya, by Bilam it says that water should emanate medolya from the pails, and we're going to say the word medolya as if it says medal, from somebody who's poor. Shemen takes it Torah, from them comes out the poor and Torah. Interesting question. Why do you find that so many rabbis, the children, in fact, do not go in their footsteps? Moshe Rabbeinu himself, his grandson in Tanakh is called Yonasan ben Gershom ben Menashe. The nun is a little bit out of place there because it's really Moshe who didn't want to embarrass Moshe. This is Moshe Rabbeinu's grandson who worked in a Beis Hamikdash Zorah. His argument was that he heard from his grandfather Moshe Rabbeinu that it's better to take on a terrible job rather than and study Torah rather than go and collect money, charity to support yourself. So therefore, he went to do that avodah. So why is it that rabbis' children are not necessarily become rabbis in their own right? I'm Rabbi Yosef. I'll tell you why. If people say that this family is a family of scholars, then two things will happen. Others whose family are not family of scholars say, what's the point of learning? Is there is some kind of Yerusha, they have some kind of entitlement for it? Or those people take it for granted. My father was a scholar, my grandfather was a scholar, then automatically you think that this person is a scholar. They don't bother to put in the hard yards. That's one explanation. Rav Sheshes Berei de Ravidia, Rav Sheshes the son of Ravidia says, we don't want them to be haughty. They're going to walk around saying, my father was this, my grandfather this, and I'm this. They're going to feel that somehow or another they're superior to everybody else. Because not only they feel superior, they actually try to manipulate and dominate over the community because they think they have some kind of entitlement because they can trace the scholarship back a few generations. Rav Ashi says, they would be condescending to everyone else. They would call them donkeys. I mean, why would they call them donkeys? So in Chassidish form, it says the chamoir means chaymer, which means crass, means a substance, chumrius, which is gashmius. And they're saying, you people, not interested in learning Torah because you're very materialistic. Ravina says, she'ein mevarchim b'Torah tefillah, because they don't make a bracha on the Torah first. And all the Rishonim say here, the pshat is that the three brachas we say every morning in davening, divrei Torah, v'harav Noah, and Shavach Habanu, they wouldn't say. The Shagas Aryeh says from here we have a proof that making a bracha before you learn Torah is a mitzvah in the Torah. All the brachas are only midrabanan. Making a bracha before a mitzvah is only midrabanan, except there's a Rashi in Kisaveh that by Truma and Maisas, when you say Yevidah, you would say, I didn't forget. And Rashi says in Milavarach for making a bracha. So it sounds like making a bracha on Truma and Maisas from the Torah. And Elio Charedim said that, but otherwise, all brachas are midrabanan, except Birchas HaTorah. Big argument, the Rambam and the Ramban. But from here, it seems that it's such an important mitzvah that as a result of them not making a bracha, they're punished that their children should not be Talmidei Chachamim. The Ran, this is called the Chassidish Ran. He says it doesn't mean they didn't make a bracha. He brings it up in the it doesn't mean they didn't make a bracha. What it means is that they did not learn for the right reasons. They didn't learn L'Shem Shemayim. They learned in order to feel superior to everybody else. But there's an interesting Rambam. The Rambam is in Pe'er Hador, and it's a collection of responses from the Rambam. And they write, and this Tshuva, I think it's Membez, they ask the Rambam, what do you mean they didn't make a bracha in the Torah? What do you mean? They didn't make a bracha? If you had to make a bracha, these are Talmidei Chachamim. Why wouldn't they have made a bracha? So he has a whole new interpretation, and it goes as follows. We're going to learn in Gemara Gittin of Samach there that there's a sort of a hierarchy. We have a Kohen who gets the first Aliyah, a Levi, the second Aliyah, and then a Yisrael. So the Rambam says that if you have a Talmud Chacham and a Kohen who's inferior in scholarship to Talmud Chacham, the Talmud Chacham should have the Kohen's Aliyah. Rav used to take the aliyah of Kohen, and therefore the Rambam says it's talking about it here that these are Tamid Chamim. When it comes to Kriyas HaTorah, they don't push forward to make sure they get the first aliyah. They allow the Kohanim, the Leviim, to get the aliyah, and that's why they get punished that their children should not be Tamid Chacham. That's what the Rambam writes. The Rambam at Persia Mishnayos in Gittin there actually goes further. He says the reason why we're in Golus is because we allow Kohanim who are inferior to take the first aliyah, and this insults the Kavod HaTorah. Very strong language from the Rambam. But in the Rambam itself, in his book of laws, Yad Chazaka, there he says that a Kohen, even if he's inferior, should get the first aliyah and then a levi. So something happened between Persia Mishnayos and this tshuva and what the Rambam paskins. Anyway, the Gemara continues. Who is this wise person? The Yavin Azay. So please explain all of this. And this pasuk continues and says, who is a Chacham? Who is the Navi that can answer my following question? The question is, why did we lose Al-Maha of the earth? Why did we lose Israel? And then the pasuk says that it became like a wilderness with nobody passing across. And he asked, then the question was asked to Chachamim and to the Nevi'im. Nobody knew the answer. The next pasuk, the Abish to answer. You know why? Could have forsaken my Torah. And now it says in the pasuk because they didn't listen to me and they didn't go my ways. Isn't that repetitive? It's not repetitive. You know what it means? Because they didn't make a bracha in the Torah first. The different explanations we just gave. That's where it comes from. What's interesting here is Rashi quotes that pasuk instead of saying in the wilderness, but with bli oiver, without anybody passing through. Rashi here brings the bli yosher, without anybody sitting there. And the Bach is a long Bach in Gimel, and he says that the Targum Yonisem and Azil, and could be Rashi also, have a different version of Tanakh. We find this, there's a Rakiva Eger, can't remember exactly offhand where it is, and he shows all throughout Shas how the Gemara sometimes quotes psukim that we don't have today. Our psukim today are different than what it says over there.
Yeah, academics study this.
And the Radak writes in Tanakh. The Radak is out of Rakiva Eger writes. The Radak writes in Tanakh the most intriguing thing. And the Radak writes in Shmuel. He writes that when the Eden, after the Churban Bayis Rishon, they lost all their scribes. None of the scribes came with them, were killed out. And suddenly they had all these different Sifrei Torah, and they didn't know which is right, because there were a lot of different versions. So the rabbis sat down, the Anshei Adolah sat down, but they were not experts. And they decided to follow the majority, But there were certain psukim that there were no majority. They just guessed. And those psukim, we find some have one word, some have another word. And he says, even though we had in the Gemara before with Nevi'im and Ksuvim, but he says even the Torah, Tanakh as well, which is an astonishing thing to say.
Some of them have dots on them as a result.
Yeah, but the Torah itself, no one has different words, except we have in Amer how to spell a word.
We have Dako in Tchitzete, and we have Pashas Noyach, Vahi.
That's spelling, not a word. Yeah. I'm saying that Radak is saying whole words. Because in the Gemara, all the cases of the Gemara where we have changes, differences is a Nach, the Nevi'im and Ksuvim, not in the Torah. And here is this Nach as well. But Radak is talking about the Torah. Fascinating, Radak. Anyway, let's continue the Gemara here. Says the Gemara further. Isa Bar Yehuda lost the Rabbi Yossi. Isa Bar Yehuda was a student in Rabbi Yossi, didn't show up in Yeshiva Tlosim for 3 consecutive days. Ashkechei Vardimas Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi's son of Menachem, I'm not sure what they call Vardimas, met him. Amalei, my time lost in Malabim Drosha. The Abba, why haven't you come to my father's base of Medrash? Is ready 3 days. Amalei, he said, Your father said something and I have no understanding. Amalei said to him, tell me what my father said. Tell me back and explain it. Amalei, Hadatanya, this is what we learned just yesterday. Rabbi Yossi says, laundering your clothes take precedence over the water for this other town. There's no logic to it. There must be a pasuk. Where is that pasuk? Difficult to understand why he didn't just front up Rabbi Yossi and ask Rabbi Yossi directly. Why did he just not, cut school? But anyway, Amalei, so he answered back to Chsiv. It says in pasuk, when it comes to the 42 cities of the Levim, so outside the city, they also had a certain shetach, 2,000 amas, and they were divided into two groups. What they did with them, and so the pasuk make it a shame. And the areas around the cities, yiyu should be lebehemton for their animals and for their. It says they also luchol chayosef for their life. Now, what does it mean? My chayosef. What do you mean their life? Ilemach means chayin, non-domesticated animals. When the Torah said for the animals, that automatically includes chayis. What do you mean chayusim? It means if they have to sustain themselves, they can use that area as well to sustain themselves, to live. Pshita, the Torah has to tell you that. Of course they can. And alav kivisa. What do you mean sustain themselves? They need to launder their clothes. So because they don't launder their clothes, they'll go mad. And therefore, the Torah says that they're allowed to use that water for themselves and not pass it on to the next town. Now, we already discussed yesterday, but I'll just quickly tell you that the one thing, when you learned the Gemara yesterday, I'm not sure if it was explained to you because none of the Rishonim here actually explained it. So what happens? You have a town A above, town B below. Town A has sufficient water to drink for the animals, everything else. And town A also needs the water for laundering. Town B has no water. They can't drink. They have nothing to survive on. So the din Rabbi Yossi says, the Chacham said, of course, you have to pass the water down. And Rabbi Yossi says, no, laundering comes first. So how do you understand? So people in town B are now going to die because they have no water to drink, and your laundering takes precedence over that. Is that what Rabbi Yossi is saying? How do we understand Rabbi Yossi? It's not explained here, but in Shulchan Aruch, in Ebenezer, in Simon Pei, and there's a din over there that talks about a nursing mother. And it says over there that the husband has to provide food for her. What happens if she says, I want more food? It's not enough. Or I want better quality food or different kinds of food. And as a result of that, if she eats that kind of food, she might endanger this child. She'll lose her milk. She won't be able to nurse a child. So the Shulchan Aruch says her pain, her tsar, takes precedence over the life of the child. And the Yesh Chalkin are those who are. Comes along the Chalkas Machaiket, who was the main commentator on Ebenezer, and he says, what is this? What, my laundry and her extra food takes precedence over the life of a child? No way. So because she's in pain, so what? And he says, where would Shmuel get this from? The Beis Shmuel says, what do you mean we'll get this from? That's exactly what Rabbi Yossi said here. Rabbi Yossi said that laundering your clothes, which is a question of pain, takes precedence over the lives of the next town. So in other words, my pain, it's not my responsibility. If they die from thirst, it's their problem, not my problem. It's my water, my pain comes first. That's what Rabbi Yossi seems to be saying. And the Gemara, so therefore we see clearly the argument of the Chelkas Mechayik and the Beis Shmuel is how we understand Rabbi Yossi. Is Rabbi Yossi talking about a smaller, I guess, less discomfort or less pain versus greater pain? In other words, they have sufficient water, barely enough to sustain themselves, but they're going to live, but they don't have enough, for anything extra. And the question of laundering versus that, and that's the argument of Chacham Rabbi Yossi, or actually they have zero amount of water, and they're going to die. But so what? My tsar comes first. But from this part of the Gemara here, when he says what pasuk, it sounds like he's saying it must be talking about that my laundering takes precedence over the person's lives, and that doesn't make sense. I can understand that they have a little bit of water, but they want more. But my laundering, the water belongs to us. Okay, it's too bad. But if it's a question of life and death versus my laundering, it doesn't make sense unless you have a pasuk. So this seems to support the Beis Shmuel's view.
It's not that there's some disease that spreads through these not washing their clothes, like typhus and others of illnesses.
The Gemara said that it's madness, and the Ran says that there's no cure for madness. But in other words, even though it might be a medical condition, there's no cure for it. The Rambam already in Masechta Shabbos in the first parak far as I know, he's the first source that we have anywhere, that when it says in the Mishnah that a person who is sick on Shabbos, you're allowed to turn off the lights if it makes the person feel comfortable. The Rambam says, what kind of sickness is that you have to turn the lights off? He says it's depression. It's melancholy and depression, and he recognizes it as a medical condition because the Mishnah says chayla. So they go here. The question of if there's therapy for it or not. Anyway, the Gemara continues. Rabbi Yossi said, "Ain't elu nidin inu nefesh." Not taking a shower, not putting on makeup is not called inu nefesh. Now the question is, according to Rabbi Yossi, does that mean that it's not a neder that you can know, or is he saying it's not inu nefesh, but it is definitely impacting their relationship? Rabbi Yossi, that therefore the husband has a right to annul it, but only limited as long as they are in a relationship. According to Rabbi Yossi, can he still annul the Nedarim by not taking a shower or by not putting on makeup because it impacts their relationship? Or Rabbi Yossi holds it doesn't really matter. Tosh Masha, Gemara first wants to bring a proof from our Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi said, "Ein elu nidin in nefesh," denying herself taking a bath or makeup is not called inu nefesh. By stressing that it's not inu nefesh, we can infer, but what is it? It's maybe beinoy lebeino. It impacts on their relationship. It is considered a thing between themselves. No proof. Dilma, perhaps he's addressing the Rabban. You go to I hold that it's nothing. It's meaningless. What's the big deal? You say that it's not only it's impacting the relationship, but actually it's detrimental to her health, her physical health or her psychological health. So he's saying to the rabbis, according to the rabbis, according to me, it's not even considered some impacts on their relationship. At least according to you, you say have a nidrei nefesh. You claim that this is considered that it's so detrimental. Ideally, at least concede to me that ain't able nidrei nefesh. They're not nidrei nefesh. They're just beinoy lebeino. Bottom line, my. So which one is it? It's an interesting argument. Rabbi says definitely impacts on their relationship, not putting on makeup, not taking a shower, and therefore he can annul it while they're in a relationship. Rav Huna ain't making it. Says nope, it's meaningless. You know why? Because you can get used to anything. We don't find his expression. We don't find a fox shemeis that will die, but off appear the dirt that he dug out from his own hole. That since you're living together in a relationship, and you get used to it. If you don't take a shower, or if you don't take showers, you get used to it. Like in the old days, people didn't. Ezra came along and said, "Erev Shabbos, you take a shower is the most revolutionary thing." If everybody is the same, then you get used to it. So it's not only it's not detrimental to her personal well-being, but also it's not detrimental to that relationship. Says the Gemara further. Tanya, we learned in a brayse kavasa de Rabbi. We learned in a brayse similar to what Rabbi Abba says. And what is that? We're going to see that there are 4 different kinds of nedarim. Some of them are inu nefesh. Some of them are beinoy lebeino. And some of them, he doesn't have to be made for it all because he has no right to make it. And some of them, he can't be made for it if he wants to. So now the Mishnah will explain each one. Dvarim sheyesh ben inu nefesh, things which pertain to inu nefesh, has what? That a negative impact on her, mayfit, he can annul, whether it's directly relates to him, whether she made a neder regarding other people. The fact is, if it hurts her, then he can annul it. What's an example? What about she'ein behen in nefesh? If there was no in nefesh there at all, then only if it's between him and her can he annul it. But if she made a neder between her and somebody else, he can't get involved. Kate, give examples. She says, I will not eat the fruits from you, from her husband. Or she said, I will not eat the fruits from that other person over there. Either case, because the fact is you're denying yourself fruits and vegetables, which are very important, so therefore is detrimental, he can annul it. But if she says, I ban, I will no longer serve my father. Or I will not cook for your brother, or to your father, my brothers. So these are things that do not affect him directly, maybe indirectly, but not directly. Doesn't harm her in any way. So therefore, he has no right to interfere. I will not in any way give straw to your animals or water to your animals. He cannot mix it, or cannot intervene at all, and so on. Case number 3. If she says, I will not put on makeup. I will not take care of my hair. Now, these two cases, according to the rabbis, that's called inui nefesh, and he can annul it. But it says in this, and here it says, I'll tell you a second, nor will I have any intimate relations with my husband. Yafet, he can annul it. But why? Not because of inui nefesh, but this is something between the relationship between him and her. Now, according to the rabbis, not putting on makeup is actually detrimental. By saying it's beinoi lebeino, obviously it's not the rabbi's opinion. So who is it? The only adversary of the rabbis is Rabbi Yossi. So this must be Rabbi Yossi. So when you originally asked whether Rabbi Yossi holds there's no neder at all, or whether he cannot interfere at all, or whether at least it's beinoi lebeino, it's clearly from here that it is beinoi lebeino. The last thing is, she says, if you remember in our ksuvas, we had the obligations from a husband to a wife and a wife to a husband. And we said that the husband has 4 different maids and she has to do nothing, no cooking or nothing else. And the only thing that she does are things of endearment. For example, make his bed, or to pour him some wine or coffee. In those days, I guess the wives would wash the face and the hands of the husbands. In these, since she is obligated, even if she has 4 maids, we want to make sure there's some kind of a relationship going on between the two. Then even if she makes a neder, the neder is meaningless. Now Gamliel says, even though the neder is meaningless because she is committed to do that, Yafet, the Mishnah there says that even if she has 100 maids, she has to do something. Because otherwise, if you do nothing all day, it can lead to other things, or you can go crazy. You have to feel productive. Every day you have to feel you did something today. So there's always something to be done. So these 3 things over here she cannot opt out of. But Gamliel says you still have to make a hafara. Why? It says a pasuk lo yachel devara. You shouldn't breach your words. So what does I learn from there? So the Ran explains very nicely. It doesn't say don't breach your promise. It says don't breach your words. Even in a case where your promise is not a valid promise, it's merely a state of words. For example, in these 3 cases here, you can't opt out of it. Still, you should go ahead and annul it, because otherwise people take vows very simply. Another opinion who disagrees with Gamliel, they say that Layachal Devara is used for something else. They can't, from here we learn out Lachacham. If you're a Chacham, so you have the right to annul other people's vows, but not your own. You cannot repeal your own vow. And this is Gemara Chagiga says mountains build on hairs, because it doesn't say in the Torah you cannot. We learned it out. Man Shamina. Now, the Gemara concludes. Who is the one who says Shalai Ekot Shalai Efkes Devori Shbeinu Lebeinu Haven? Who's the one who says that not taking a shower, or sorry, not putting on makeup and all that is not considered inui nefesh, but something else? That's Rabbi Yossi. Uktani clearly says the meifim should Devori Shbeinu Lebeinu, and he puts in the category of impacting on relationships, so he could annul it. Amamah. In the Bryce it said, Shalai Ishamish Mitasi, if I'll have no intimate relation with my husband, Yafet, he should be able to know it. Now the question is, that is what a husband and wife is supposed to be doing. The Torah says there are 3 obligations between the two, and one of them is oinasa. So how can she make a neder against the Torah? The Torah says that you have a duty or mitzvah. How can she make a neder and say that I don't want to do this mitzvah? So you more ask the question, he has a right to know it. What are you talking about? If the Amr, she says, Hanas Tashmishi Alecha, I don't want you to have any pleasure from me. Why bother canceling it? She has a mitzvah to be with her husband, so as long as a husband and wife, she can't make a neder to opt out of it. It's against the Torah. Ella, what happened was she said, Hanas Tashmish Cholai, I don't have any pleasure from you. And just like on Pesach, if a person makes a neder that all matzah is forbidden to me, that on Pesach, even though you have a mitzvah to eat matzah, she cannot eat matzah. Why? Because you placed a prohibition on the matzah, so therefore we cannot give it to you. Same thing here. She put a prohibition on her husband. Therefore, even though there's a mitzvah of oina, we cannot force her, because it will be an avera for her. We could have a Kana, and this follower of Kana, the Omer of Kana said, Hano as tashmish alecha. She says to him, to her husband, I'm forbidden to you. Koifim shemashte. She can't say that because the Torah clearly says the mitzvah neder is meaningless. Hano as tashmish alai. But if she says to the husband, you're forbidden to me, then Yofer, he has the knowledge. You cannot feed someone something that is forbidden to you. Now, in reality, she shouldn't be making another either, because there's a mitzvah between the two of them. However, Man Tana, who is the one that believes that Dvarim Hamutarim, if something essentially is permitted, but you think that it's prohibited, or you want to follow say that I'm going to practice as if this is prohibited. Now, the truth of the matter is, it's not prohibited, but you decided you want to follow that way. You're not allowed to just say to this person, don't worry about it. It's not prohibited. You still have to go through the motions as if it is prohibited, and you have to be mataneder. Why? And who is that? That is Rabbi Gamliel. Because Gamliel says over here, she made a neder that she will not, pour the wine, even though it's obligations which you made up in the beginning of the marriage, she would, but still go through the process of annulling it, because she thinks that it's prohibited to go through the process. So we learn out a very important halacha from the Ran says, if you ever do any chumrah, any practice, any chumrah, even though you didn't think that you're going to do this every time, you didn't say I'm making a neder, nothing. If you practice any chumrah, according to some once, some say twice, 3 times, it becomes like a neder. So, for example, let's say you're machmir, you're not going to eat gebrocks on Pesach. You don't say I'm making a neder, but you know what? I'm not going to eat gebrocks on Pesach. Then it becomes a neder, and you have to keep it every year unless you go ahead and mata neder. Well, the example Shulchan gives is if you stand an entire day of Yom Kippur during davening. There's no mitzvah that says you have to stand, but you want it to feel, be more machmir, daven better, be more focused. If you do that once, you have to do the rest of your life, unless you're mata neder. And where do we learn it from? Says the Ran from right here. Because it says something which is really mutter, but you decided to conduct yourself as if it's asr. You cannot just walk away from it, it became too hard, No, it's a neder, and you have to be mata neder, and you have to go through a whole exercise, find an excuse, why things are different now and so on.
So if one year you have Chol Yisrael, you have to have it for
Same
life
thing.
then.
100%, unless you're mata neder. And then you have to have a good reason. You have to have a Pesach. No, the Pesach would be, if you were to realize that in your city there's no milk, or milk available, something like that.
Yeah.
That would be like a Pesach. Otherwise, you can't just walk away. Exactly, but this only applies to chumras, not if you did something which is no chumra. And the example the Ran gives, by the way, is if you said, I won't eat meat or drink wine these 2 weeks during the year, then the rest of their life, those 2 weeks during that period, you're not allowed to eat meat or wine unless you're matan neder. Okay, says he wanted further. The other opinion we brought in the Brayso, the Yachod Dvorei, they argue, Mekan letalmid chacham she'ein made for nidei la'atzma, that even though you can annul other people's Nedarim, you cannot annul your own. But Mani and Gamliel belongs in the previous 2 lines. So Rava asked of Nachman an interesting question. Tashmish hamita l'rabbanon, according to the rabbis, if Tashmish hamita, Inui nefeshu or dvarim shebeino lebeno. She makes that neder that we won't have any relations. The husband can annul it, like we said in here. Is that considered inui nefesh according to the rabbis? This bright we learned before Rabbi Yossi, but according to the rabbis, is it inui nefesh? So therefore, when he abolishes the neder, it's forevermore. Even if they get divorced, the neder is no longer neder. Or is it only impacting on their personal relationship, and the moment they're divorced, and she marries someone else, whatever, then the neder comes right back. Says the Gemara, how do we treat that? Amalei, they said to him, to Nisua, we're going to learn in the Mishnah later on, where it says, a woman says, I don't want to have any relations, any intimate relations with any Jew in the world. Any Jew includes her husband. So obviously, Yofer, till that night, he has the right to Yofer Chelkoi. He can go ahead and know the neder that affects him. They can have relations, but the neder still remains intact as far as all the other Jews are. Notice after they get divorced, because while she's married, she can anyway. But after they get divorced, she's still forbidden to any other Jew until she's matan neder, which means that it's only considered beinoi lebeino, because if it would be considered a neder of inyon nefesh, psychological damage or physical damage, then after the divorce, the neder is still not a neder. But you're saying clearly here that the neder kicks back in as soon as they get divorced or becomes a widow, that she has a neder. So it means it's only beinoy lebeina. So if you can tell me that in a nefesh, you can tell me that's considered detrimental. Why afterwards it's forbidden all other Jews? From here we see clearly that the varim that this is treated as if it's only impacts their personal relationship. Says Gemara, what are you talking about? We're going to learn that all the Mishnahs in the last parak in Nedarim was authored by Rabbi Yossi. And Rabbi Yossi is very particular in what's considered in a nefesh. My question is according to the rabbis. The rabbis hold that not taking a shower is considered in a nefesh, or not putting on makeup. How would they treat tashmish hamita? And what you're telling me is our Mishnah later on is Rabbi Yossi. How do we know the author of all the Mishnahs later on is Rabbi Yossi? So Gemara says, the Rabbanan tibaylach. My question is, I'm asking you about the Rabbanan. That Mishnah that you're quoting was written by Rabbi Yossi. How do I know that? Because Avuna said, Kula Pirka Rabbi Yossi. The rest of this parak was written and authored by Rabbi Yossi. Memai, how do we know? Kivan Diktani, the very first Mishnah in this parak says, Rabbi Yossi says, Ein elu nidre in nefesh. When he talks about the shower, the deprivation of a shower or makeup, Rabbi Yossi starts off saying, these are not considered in a nefesh, and then he gives examples what is in a nefesh. If she says, I won't have any fruits and vegetables, and then we discuss if she chooses one particular store that she won't go into, or one particular person, how do we consider that? And Rabbi Yossi concludes by a store. If that store gives credit to the husband, there are no alternatives because this is the only store that give credit. Then the husband has a right to annul it because that's considered in a nefesh. And the Mishnah concludes, Eilu divrei Rabbi Yossi. Now the question is, it started off saying Rabbi Yossi. Why do you have to conclude again, Eilu divrei Rabbi Yossi? Says the Gemara. Since it said Rabbi Yossi says, Ein Eilu nidei in a nefesh, lama le'sula mishnah, why do you have to repeat again, Hadei yafa divrei Rabbi Yossi? Why do you have to conclude the Mishnah and say, Hadei yafa, these words Rabbi Yossi? Shmamana, these three words, divrei Rabbi Yossi is not referring back to the previous Mishnah, it's talking about the future Mishnahs. That Mekan ve'elech Rabbi Yossi. From here on in, the author of the Mishnahs is Rabbi Yossi. Okay, so therefore we haven't resolved the question, and it remains unresolved. The Rishonim already have an argument which way we should go. If Tashmish Hamit is considered Beinoy lebeina or in your nefesh, and we're machmir that it's Beinoy lebeina, therefore she needs. We're machmir that yes, Beinoy lebeina, therefore she needs to be mat neder after she gets